Okay, good evening, everyone. I am dialing in from Tel Aviv, and Fleur is with us dialing in from Jerusalem, if I'm correct. So it is 8:15, 16 p.m. here in Israel. If you're in the US, wherever you may be, thank you for joining us today. It's wonderful to have you here. So for anyone who's on this, I'm going to take a grand assumption after 30 months of having phenomenal partners around the world. You have some idea who Israel Friends is and what we're doing here. I will give the 60-second version just to be assistive. So I'm Kyle Blank. I'm the CEO and executive director of Israel Friends. We started the organization 2.5 years ago to protect and save as many Israeli lives as possible. And in that time, our refined mission, our goals have been to provide innovative solutions in the defense and security sector in Israel, as well as the healthcare and mental health care sector in Israel. And that's what we've been doing with your support. Thank you for being part of our community, and for those who are new members of our community. And we have been blessed with tremendous support and have gone through a lot of good. In short, we've done many advanced innovative programs with the Army and the Ministry of Defense, bringing in drones, hostage rescue equipment, new camera systems to keep our soldiers and our civilian guards safe. And as well, on the mental health side, we've built two national programs, one that is better known called Healthy Mind, where we have built a national infrastructure of a telehealth platform for immediate access to psychiatric care. And as of January, just 2 months ago, we exceeded treating over 10,000 Israelis with anxiety, depression, PTSD, and trauma over this war. We're here every day. We're operating both in defense and healthcare sectors during this crisis, of course, more than ever. And so we're going to pivot to our conversation of the evening. And then at specific points, I'll let you know what we're doing this week. Um, so Fleur Hassan-Nahoum is an incredible Israeli and advocate of our country. And I am blessed to have her here as a guest, not for the first time, to share her thoughts with all of us. Um, Flora and I go back a while. I think she's best known for being a former deputy mayor of Jerusalem, the most complicated city in the world, to then becoming a special envoy now to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And that's leaving out a small point of how she was very involved and has been very involved in the Abraham Accords. And so, given what's been going on this past week, the last 3 years, the last few months, and specifically this week, and what may come, we wanted to provide an environment where someone who actually knows what has been happening and what might happen could provide perspective. So, Flor, it's amazing to have you here with us.
So thank you so much, Carl. It's always great to chat with you, and I'm always in awe at the work that you managed to do with your wonderful board and your staff since the war. It's like one of the great stories of Israeli resilience and of young people basically taking charge. And so I'm very proud to be associated with you and Israel Friends. So, we could do this two ways. I could just talk, or you could ask me questions, or I could talk for 10 minutes and then the audience asks me questions. But I'll just say a few things. And I'm always happy to answer questions because it seems that we always end up running out of time. And I like it when it's a dialogue rather than a monologue. But, the focus of the talk this evening is to really talk about what's going on in the Gulf and Abraham Accords. And what's happening is actually quite extraordinary. I want to talk a little bit about the run up, what's happened to the Abraham Accords through October 7th until today, and what will happen with them in the future because of the Iran war. So I'll try not to make that too long because I really think that a lot of people have great questions that I'd like to also answer. So let's start with 2020. We signed the Abraham Accords. The UAE signed, Bahrain signs, Morocco signs, Sudan signs. And we have this incredible growth and cultural exchange and excitement. And people are so excited to be living in this new era of the region. And it really lived up to, actually, I think it probably exceeded the expectations of the signatories of the Abraham Accords, like the UAE ambassador in Washington, Yusuf Al-Utaiba, once said to me, we always knew there'd be trade and business, did we think that an Israeli little league team from Jerusalem was going to come to Abu Dhabi? No, never. And so there was a lot of interesting cultural exchanges and Israelis going over there as tourists. Very, very interesting era, which I'm so happy that I was involved in. And I co founded the UAE Israel Business Council and the Gulf Israel Women's Forum. And we did, it was still COVID time. So we did like tens and tens of webinars on business, on different business verticals that were attended by both Israelis and Emiratis, Bahrainis. It was a beautiful time, really beautiful time. And trade kept going up. I'm going to use the UAE as the main anchor country because Bahrain is a very small country and it's not the same kind of logistical hub as the UAE is. But, you know, in 2023, and you remember the last quarter, we were already in war. 2023, you know, the numbers were something like almost $3 billion of trade. I mean, up from nothing, very little in 2020. That is incredible. That is really huge. Now, after October 7th, a lot of people, and then the war that ensued, a lot of people truly believed that this was the end of the Abraham Accords. How could Israel sustain the Abraham Accords amidst a regional war with Sunni proxies of the Islamic Republic of Iran, but still against what they conceive in the street in these countries as the Palestinians, right? And so, and I have to say, the press in the Arab world didn't change much. Some did, like Al Arabiya, which is a Saudi channel, some didn't. But, you know, in October 7th, it was touch and go. And the best thing that happened was that trade kept happening like if there was no war. It's actually incredible to think in 2024, which was a full year of war, we went up to something like $3.5 billion in trade, which means it went up more than 10% from the year before. And then in 2025, it's gone up over $4 billion. Now, what happened in 2024 that gave me hope that this was really long term? And what happened was that Iran attacked us in April of 2024, and then they attacked us again in September of 2024. Now, when they attacked us through the night, in 2024 was non-ballistic, in April, and then in September was ballistic, is that the next day was a Saturday night. The next day, the UAE, Saudi, which is not even a signatory, and Jordan came out and said, we helped Israel through that night repel the attacks of Iran. Now, in the region, rhetoric and reality can mean two different things. You know, you have these conversations with these Arab leaders and they're super friendly and they know they're with us. But when they speak to the street, when they speak to the average person in their country, they have a different tone because the street is expecting something else. But to me, the main sign that these accords were going to stick was that the day after that first attack by the Iranians, the UAE came out and the Saudis came out, and they didn't just, it's not that they helped us, it's that they admitted that they helped us. And that to me was a moment where they're coming out proudly saying, we helped Israel through the night. That was a game changer. That was a game changer. And that, of course, continued in September. And again, trade continued unencumbered. We finished 24 up, like I said, 25 up. And all this time, you know, the Emiratis have intimated to us that essentially they signed these accords for the long term. They did not sign these accords to be flip-floppy about it. They've also invested $1 billion in our future energy supplies of gas. And so they're very, very involved, even though we don't see hordes of Emiratis coming on tourism the way that Israelis do over there. They're very much committed to this. Okay, so that's the background. Bahrain pretty much does more or less the same thing. They follow the lead of Saudi. But in the last few months, something very weird started happening with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, for those of you who remember, was really in September 23 on their way to signing and being part of the Abraham Accords. The MBS said it openly. It was something that Israel was talking about, and it was going to happen. And I'm convinced, and you don't have to believe me, but papers were found in Gaza by Israeli army that essentially they timed October 7th when they did because they wanted to do everything to derail the potential normalization with Saudi. Because that to them, remember, their big their big puppet master is the Islamic Republic of Iran, Hamas, and the Houthis, and of course Hezbollah. They're all that ring of fire that the Islamic Republic of Iran works so hard to do to Israel. So they're like, well, the neighboring countries aren't going to attack them. So instead, let's create proxies in the neighboring areas that will attack them. That was always the tactic. And so Saudi was also kind of keeping neutral throughout the war, October 7th. Now and again, they said a few things. And in the last few months, they decided when they saw what was happening with Iran, when they saw that the people of Iran were rising, when they saw America and Israel making statements, they kind of went dark on us. They kind of did a 180. They started kind of reviving their rhetorical attacks against Israel. Their channel, which has been interviewing me throughout the war, called Al Arabiya, they've got an English channel. A few years back, they were like Al Jazeera, but then they made an editorial change. And believe me, I felt it because going on BBC was a lot worse than going on Al Arabiya. And they also started flipping a little bit. So in the last few months, the Saudis started making a very inexplicable 180 away from Israel and away from the Abraham Accords. And we kept thinking to ourselves, what are they thinking? Why are they doing this? So one of the theories was that, they see that if the Islamic Republic fall, then Saudi is not the big kahuna anymore in the region. Iran is a much bigger country with huge supplies of crude oil. And so now the Saudis are not the biggest player in the region in terms of his partnership with the United States. That's one theory. Other theories are that the people on the streets, there's like 2%, 3% approval for Saudi signing a peace treaty with Israel. And before October 7th, it was 10%, which was still very little, but then it went down and down and down. And so there's lots of different theories, but they were playing this double game where they kind of were welcoming in Jewish investors, welcoming in Jewish delegations from America, thinking, yeah, we'll take the money, but we're now not going to be even thinking about signing a normalization with Israel. And then Shabbat morning, we attack, along with the Americans, we attack the Islamic Republic of Iran. And something very curious has happened for those of you who haven't noticed. The Islamic Republic have started attacking the Gulf countries. I don't understand why they're doing it. I have a theory. But whatever reason they had has completely backfired on them. So I think the original reason why they attacked the UAE and Saudi Arabia, they didn't attack Qatar until a couple of days after, was because they really thought that if they attacked these countries, that they would pressurize America, who's also an ally of these countries, to stop. Now, it's a logical thought because it was Saudi and the UAE that were encouraging America not to attack the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so their thought was, if we now start threatening them, then they're going to push America to say, stop, we can't take it. But their gamble backfired because they went too far. They overplayed their hand. They essentially started targeting civilian targets, hotels, the airport, their economic infrastructure, the heart of their economic infrastructure. They've done the same to Saudi. And then they started attacking Qatar because there's an American base in Qatar, but they're starting attacking Qataris. They're starting attacking Kuwaitis. What have Kuwait got to do with any of this? And today they even threw a missile to Turkey. And so a few surprising things have come out of it. One is that these countries have actually have got. Oh, and I want to add, this is not the first time Iran has attacked the UAE and Saudi. They attacked them a few years back, but it was kind of very minimal, very deliberate, very pinpointed. It was almost like they wanted to say to them, "Here, we're attacking you," but not go further. Now, this time they went further. They overplayed their hand. And what's happened is the opposite effect of what they wanted. The UAE and Saudi and Qatar and even Kuwait have proven to have quite impressive air defenses that we didn't know they had. I mean, we've sold about 15% of our drone technology to the UAE. So we know what they have in that sense because we've sold it to them. But we didn't know how well prepared they were, actually, in terms of their air defenses. So they've repelled, most of these countries have repelled 90% plus of the incoming missiles and drones, which is very impressive. There have been a number of casualties, of course, and it's always regretful, just like we've had casualties. But for the most part, they've held their own, these Gulf countries. But it's backfired because they're now saying to America, finish the job. So the same countries, the Islamic Republic have done something really incredible. They have not only united the Gulf countries, who were bitterly divided, by the way. Qatar and the UAE weren't speaking. They started speaking a couple of years ago. The Saudis and the Qatar hate each other. The Kuwaitis hate everyone. I mean, it's not a peaceful regional pact. But what the Islamic Republic have managed to do is incredible. They've not just united the Gulf, they've united the Gulf with Israel and America. So they've actually done the very opposite of what they set out to do. And that really bodes very well into what will happen after the war, because it makes a lot of sense now that after this war, a friend of mine called me up and she said, Fleur, you don't understand. Kuwait might sign the Abraham Accords. And I always said that Kuwait would be the last country to sign the Abraham Accords because they're very truly anti-Semitic, very, very much so. That their language is very anti-Semitic. But listen, nothing like a common enemy to unite people in the region. And the Islamic Republic of Iran might have managed to do what years of diplomacy wouldn't have done. And that is unite the Gulf together and unite the Gulf with the United States and Israel. And so, in terms of what's going to happen after the war, this may actually be that moment when the region unites and all of them, including Saudi, normalize with Israel, which is, I think, very, very exciting. So that's in terms of the Gulf.
Fleur, thank you for providing such a well-painted tapestry for many of us who are less acquainted with the Gulf and the various countries and territories within it. I guess given today and yesterday, like I've been here for a very long time in Israel, right, over a decade and a half. And we've always had these moments with the countries around us. Where do we really stand with Jordan? Where do we really stand with Egypt? What's going on with Lebanon today? But there's a whole wider picture happening this week, right? That you've said a
Yeah.
lot of it has historical elements that are going forwards. But in the last few days, Europe has been attacked, NATO has been shot at, Israel, of course, the Gulf, of course, American bases all over, right? And so I guess if you have a way to kind of go out and come back in per those region areas, the war started and there were European allies to the United States and European allies to Israel who were like, this isn't needed and everyone should stop and de-escalate. And then it only took a few hours or a few days for them to realize, oh, we're getting shot at also. There's an enemy at Europe's doorstep that's actually shooting at Europe. When they said we're
Yeah.
going to make missiles that can go all the way to America, that meant they had to fly over Europe to get there one day.
Yeah.
And so I guess what would be very curious for many people, and I've got some of it in the Q&A, is what are your thoughts about how this impacts the Middle East European set of relationships and Israel in that mix, and separately with NATO, because these are all, developments from just really the last 12 to 48 hours.
Yeah. Well, I saw also in the chat that Bonnie had some questions about NATO, but yeah, today, what's really interesting is that today they attacked Turkey and a NATO, NATO has this pact that if one is attacked, all are attacked. And they blew out the missile out of the sky. Meanwhile, Erdogan is still talking horrible things about Israel, saying that, we're the aggressors, etc. So look, he is bona fide Muslim Brotherhood, and he also has ambitions to be the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood League of Nations or whatever. And so he's an Islamist. He's not happy about what's going on. They have good ties with the Islamic Republic, and I really don't know what's going to happen in terms of NATO, because some countries, I think, at this point shouldn't bother to be in NATO. I mean, Spain, which is a NATO country, has basically gone out against the offensive, not saying neutral, they've gone out against the offensive. They have ties to China. The prime minister is a communist and a hypocrite and anti-Semite. And I say that in Spanish regularly on Spanish TV. And so you've got countries like Spain. You've got countries that have proven to be so weak, so feckless, with no spine, like Keir Starmer in the UK and Macron. But even these countries are now being dragged into it because a UK military base was attacked in Cyprus. The French are sending over things now because they've realized that they can't stay out of it, because eventually their assets are also going to get hit. And so, whether they like it or not, they're now involved in this war. What has to be seen is what the value of these countries. I think it's a good question about NATO, because what it would bring up for me is for America, who puts the most money and the most resources into NATO, as they do for everything. Why do they need Spain in NATO? Why do they need Turkey in NATO? Which are the countries that actually have the capability and the will to defend not just their sovereign nation, but the partnership that is NATO? So I think that this war will bring up a lot of these questions post-war, and it's a conversation that needs to be had. The EU, again, it's ridiculous. They put out a statement like, we're watching with concern, or, oh, come on, like, what are these international organizations good for, if not to defend people when they're in their worst moments? And this is what was happening to the Iranian people. So the hypocrisy of them having everything to say about Gaza every other day of the week, there was a new statement on Gaza. They were silent about 50,000 protesters getting killed in Iran. And now they're just writing statements and saying, we're watching with concern. Well, you stay concerned. We'll just win the war for you. Don't worry about it. And so, yeah, this is the current climate of the world. It's really sorting out the men from the boys, this war.
Is relaying to what you said earlier, do you think Israel's positioning over the last while has been a very intimate relationship with the United States, and then other countries, depending on what was available based on their leadership? So there have been great times with Australia and great times with the UK, and more challenging times. One can't forget that the French are not a useful ally these days, but they were very useful in the 50s and 60s. So things have changed over time. But you made a
Yeah.
comment about the Gulf and Israel. So do you see a change dynamic for Israel for where it's spending its energy instead of trying to woo the Brits and the French and the Spanish? Maybe in a year or two from now, the focus is the United States, India, and the Gulf instead of spending all this time and energy on Europe?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And, I did a lot of press with the Indian media when Modi was here. Just didn't even get a chance to put it anywhere because we were at war the next day. But that's a great question. And it's already something that is in the works. So the main kind of Abraham Accords infrastructural project is something called the IMEC, which is the India Middle East Corridor, which is essentially a trade route, the Silk Route of the future, let's call it that, from India through the Gulf countries. The idea was Saudi, through Jordan, Israel, and then Israel, Europe. So it was a way, this IMEC, India Middle East Corridor, was a way of connecting India to Europe. And of course, Europe connects then further to the United States. That is something that the State Department, I've been having talks with them about, as well as the Foreign Ministry of Israel, that was actually being built, very real talks and plans, committees, working committees, etc. So I think, and then Saudi went a bit cold, like I said, in the last few months. And you see, that is a very real, probably the biggest kind of physical project to come out of the Abraham Accords, the IMEC. So I've got a feeling that now that we're having this war, that's going to be revived and pushed up and built faster. That's one of the things that that is certainly going to be one of the outcomes of this war, which is already in planning stages, but now I think it could be a very real prospect. We have allies in Europe. They're normally now in the eastern part of Europe. We have countries like Hungary, Albania, Macedonia, Kosovo, Serbia, Poland, Romania, Georgia. A lot of these countries understand that the major threat to civilization today, certainly to Europe in a much more urgent way, is Islamization. They get it. And they've been steadfast supporters. And thanks to them, we haven't had more trouble from the EU. They're not all EU countries, but thanks to them, some of them have been vetoing some of the worst things that the European Union wanted to do to us in terms of boycotts. They are steadfast friends of ours. But also, reality is that Europe, the EU, is one of Israel's biggest trading partners. So we can't, my mother taught me a very valuable lesson. You can't cut your nose to spite your face. And so the EU is an important trading partner with us. We have to keep those relationships for the sake of trade, economy, diplomacy. But at least you know who your real friends are in these moments. And that is something that everybody should bear in mind continuously. So that's what I would say. There's one more project that we have that reinforces your question about, are we going to grow closer to the East rather than the West? There's another very interesting project that I was involved in at the outset, which was before October 7th, and the whole thing was put on hold. It's called I2U2, Israel, India, USA, UAE, and it's a quadrilateral agreement. That also, I think, after Modi's visit, might be revived. And now that the USA is, much more involved here, it might be another very positive project ahead. But I think to answer your question in short, yes, I think there will be new regional alliances and there will be a new focus. And the irony is, you have a country like the UAE, who, a very rich country, pays for its students to study in the UK and in the USA. And they've basically now said to the students, you can't study in the UK anymore because you might be radicalized there. So the UAE is no longer sending their Emirati students to the UK because of fear of radicalization. So you have this ironic situation where you may end up with a de-radicalized Middle East, a de-radicalized Arab world, and a radicalized Europe. You can't make this up.
Wow, it's an incredible perspective, and I know everyone here is appreciating it. Um, I am well aware, like you, having come from abroad and moved here, that very often the media outlets abroad are, let's say very nicely, they're useless on reporting about Israel. Let's use that as like the nicest framing of what's going on.
Useless. Wow.
Yeah, I'm trying to be nice here. And so depending on the outlet. So, many of our friends are on WhatsApp groups and the Red Alert app and trying to see what's going on in Israel. We've painted a very wide picture of what's going on regionally. And later on, if we have time, would love to hear some of your thoughts about the countries that immediately circle us. But I guess right now, for those who are getting their news not from Israeli outlets and aren't in Israel, can you share in 2 minutes what is currently going on in Israel for the average Israeli? And as a member, a member of the wider, government efforts here, what does the Israeli operation in Iran, look like in terms of the updates we have been provided publicly? Because a lot of that news never leaves the country, unfortunately. So I think
True.
a lot of people would be curious.
True. I mean, I've been pressing for a long time for one of the Israeli channels to do a decent international channel. And I think Israel needs that. And I know that I've been talking to some people about that. Um, but look, I've got friends who live in America who have the alert app. I'm like, why? I said, we have no choice. We're not sleeping. But you don't have to give yourself PTSD just to feel that you're in solidarity. We know you're in solidarity with us. Look, come on. All you have to do is open up any of the, Times of Israel, Jerusalem Post, JNS, my own platform. There's plenty of ways to get your information. What's going on right now in Israel is that I honestly think we're ahead of schedule. I think Trump is right about that. I don't think I I'm a spiritual person, so I see a miracle in everything. You know, the fact that for the last 2 nights, I know that it's not been like that in Tel Aviv, and I'm sorry, but the last 2 nights, there's not been any sirens in Jerusalem. And I feel like, well, I don't feel, I just saw the Pentagon press briefing. They're firing a lot less than they were firing on the first and second day. Might not feel that way, but that's what's happening. Another thing is they're very diluted because 60% of their missiles have gone to the UAE, which is crazy to think about it, really crazy. Um, so I'm not quite sure whether the 12-day war was worse than this. I'm not sure about the volume. It was bad then and it's bad now. But I really believe that the combined strength of Israel and America is literally pulling their pants down. And the question just remains now, what is the alternative government when we're done decimating them? And that is something which is still not clear. People shout the name Reza Pahlavi. He's a great guy. He said he wants to be a transitional leader. I support that. People seem to be shouting his name and have a lot of trust in him. And vacuums of power is not good. So it's better to have somebody at least well known and a transition than having nothing, because that's when the bad actors can slip in. In terms of Israel itself, listen, we are doing, I think I'll add one thing about Lebanon because it's important, about Hezbollah. Hezbollah 3 days ago were between a rock and a hard place. And I would venture to say the Houthis find themselves in the same dilemma right now. And that is that their sugar daddy is the Islamic Republic of Iran. $30 billion over 30 years, the Hezbollah have received from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the whole point of that money was for when D-Day comes along, they are there defending their brethren in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And they have been seriously weakened by us with the war against, when they fired rockets and we retaliated. We killed Nasrallah. He's not been replaced. He was a transformational leader that was not replaced by anybody charismatic or influential like him. And so Hezbollah is already weakened. But the minute that they threw the missiles over here 2 nights ago, 3 days ago, they basically opened the doors to hell because it gave us the excuse to go in and finish the job. And we're doing it. We're there. The whole world is looking this way. And we're very focused also on ensuring that the Shia threat coming from our northern border from Hezbollah it finishes. And look, the truth is that once we bring down Iran, the Islamic Republic, Hezbollah is very much no longer a strategic threat, right? But if we can finish them off a day at the same time, that would be great. But what's really interesting is that the Lebanese government, for the first time in decades, have grown a spine and have criminalized. They've criminalized Hezbollah. That's never happened. It is momentous. And mark my words, Lebanon will also be joining the Abraham Accords, believe it or not.
So I was going to touch on Lebanon, and I appreciate that you wrapped it in. So sitting here in Tel Aviv, you're right. So we're kind of the epicenter of the attack by Iran, and we've had sirens go off since the start, about every 3 or 4 hours. So we definitely, I think, it feels similar to the June events in terms of frequency. I know I basically think how frequently am I lifting up a child and bringing them into the bomb shelter. So I think it's similar in frequency. The the thing that was strange was we got used to a 5 to 10 minute warning based on the satellite imagery in the Israeli
That's
airports.
right.
So
That's right.
yesterday was the first time that
It was
Hezbollah shot at
Hezbollah.
Israel a few days ago, but it was shot at Tel Aviv. And
So it
so
was
suddenly
two
an air
minutes.
raid went off. Right. So we've got 90 seconds in Tel Aviv. At least that's what they tell us. And my head jerked around because I didn't have the warning. And it was my fear moment this week. I remember my fear moment in June, but it really just filled with fear. I was holding my 3 week old. I ran to the bomb shelter. I put him down. I ran to my wife who was in the shower, who didn't have a 10-minute warning. I said, "You have 45 seconds." She didn't understand. It's like it's an actual air raid. And then I ran to grab our 2 year old and run in, put him down, close the door behind the three of us. And the most dangerous thing is being in the shower, being wet and slipping. So my wife trying to be careful and not getting hurt.
Yeah,
And thank
yeah.
God we're all okay. But Hezbollah getting involved has created a whole new level of war for us here and concern, and honestly anxiety for many of us that are being impacted by it. We'll talk about that in a moment. My question for you would be, as we have tens of thousands of soldiers driving to the northern border, and we all thought we were going in yesterday, and then got it postponed to today, and now it's postponed to tomorrow. There's a conversation about taking 25, 30 kilometers of southern Lebanon. We've kind of been in this experience before. This is not our first battle with Hezbollah. And so my question is, even with Iran defamed, they are hardened warriors. They have a ton of ammunition and weapons. We took 5 kilometers before, which means that everything above that is going to be very dangerous. What, hopefully, you said you're a spiritual person, you're, optimistic person. What do you think might happen here? Because in our previous engagements, we have lost a lot of troops on the ground in Lebanon, never with any good victory.
Yeah, you're right. But that's because they always had the Islamic Republic of Iran behind them, supplying them, and they've trained. Now, there's a few things happening. A lot of the Hezbollah fighters are abandoning ship. A lot of them are abandoning ship. They're kind of reading the room, which is good. Um, like I said, Nasrallah was a very, I always say that nobody's irreplaceable, but Nasrallah hasn't been replaced yet. The guy there, sorry, is a very kind of Parev character. And people are not really seeing him as a strong leader. In the Arab world, as you know, you need a strong leader. It's interesting to see. I mean, he's not going to last very long. But what happens to Khamenei's son now that he's taken over from his father? If he's going to be that strong leader, it hasn't started very well. These rumors that he was being treated in England for impotence. Anyway, but I think it's different now because we've got them on the run, because we've destroyed. They still have a lot of missiles, Hezbollah. The irony is that before October 7th, nobody was looking at Hamas. Everybody was looking at Hezbollah. And the conversations in Israel was like, oh, when we go to war with Hezbollah, there's going to be skyscrapers in Tel Aviv are going to be knocked down. And in the end, we got them so well with intelligence and disabling them that we really didn't just destroy many of their launchers and missiles. We also kind of destroyed their morale which in war it's so important. It's a psychological more than anything, which is what we've done a lot with Iran as well now with the Islamic Republic. So I do think it's different. Their sponsor and sugar daddy is on the ropes. They're on the ropes because they don't have their mythical leader. They're on the ropes because Lebanon is now disassociating and criminalizing them. They're on the ropes because many of them are smelling the coffee and abandoning the ship. So I do think we are now in historic times where the hinge of history could go to a brand new era that we never thought possible. And I don't think it's actually far-fetched to think that we could, destroy Hezbollah. Maybe not to the end, but the minute that they don't run the show for so many people, for hundreds of thousands, same with Hamas in Gaza, the minute they're not in charge of those people, don't give jobs to people, they can't afford giving jobs to people. That's it. It's over. That's how they control their popularity. They employ people, they give them food, they give them money, they use them as soldiers. Once that's gone, because the money's not coming in, because Lebanon is disassociating someone, Israel's pounding all of their infrastructure, it's game over. So I do think it's different.
Well, I really appreciate that perspective. To be respectful of your time and just me, I think your optimism and your spiritual sense has created a lack of sirens. So to be fair, every other day between 8 and 9, there was a siren. So I was nervous when we scheduled this time slot. And I'm happy we really got to go through the group's questions here. Um, I think for many here, in my conversations across, there's seemingly this last ditch effort by Iran to blow everything up and just to make as much of a mess as they can. And so here you have the
Yeah.
missiles all across the region. You have the
Yeah.
proxies in Lebanon, and as well there are proxies, well-known proxies in Judea and Samaria, in what's also known as the West Bank. And so
Yeah.
I know that there is deep concern across the Israeli military and defense establishment about domestic security. And so, in that view, just as we close here, so at Israel Friends, we've spent this war and forwards building infrastructure and defense and mental health to better our country, to protect and save lives. Um, I think I'd point to two things, and everyone will hear good updates afterwards. What we're seeing is tens of thousands of soldiers and civilian guards in Judea and Samaria, and tens and what will be more thousands of soldiers in Lebanon that all are in real serious need of support. And so here we're providing them that support. We
Yeah.
are running a international campaign to raise funds to give them those needs. That's drones, that's helmets, that's vests, that's first aid kits, with other complicated equipment. And separately, in the space of mental health, sitting here and openly speaking with my friends about the stress levels we're at. So we run the number one telehealth platform in the country for psychiatric care. So we have
Nice.
governing numbers over the country. I can say factually that just in a few days, in 4 days, we have seen a 233% increase in demand for psychiatrists for psychiatric care
Of course.
nationwide. And so the numbers are immense. And for those who have already been very involved here, thank you. And we appreciate you continuing to be involved in spreading our news and what we're doing, because this is where we're needed. Being aware, learning with someone like Fleur about what's going on in the region, and then giving it our all to our troops and our civilians who need the support. Fleur, thank you for being with us today. It's always phenomenal to partner like you around. If we were in the same city, I would see you, but I guess we'll wait till the missiles die down.
We
But
will.
really
We're
phenomenal to have you
waiting.
today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who joined. I don't know whether you want me to answer some of the questions. I'm quite happy to.
Oh,
Um,
if you have a window, so I'll be respectful of everyone's time because I know that many people are at work, but you leave when you have to
yeah.
go. Or you can take the mic as you go and hit anything that piques your interest.
So somebody said you see North Korea getting involved. I don't think they would dare. Neva, hi. You can say about the difference of opinion in Israel between the friendly governments and the street in those countries. I think that definitely what nobody's ever dealt with or taken seriously is anti-Semitism in the Arab world. There are models of countries who've dealt with it, like the UAE. And I think that it's about time that Egypt, which has had peace with us for decades, and Jordan also joined that. But again, I want to say something. I think that what countries don't do is because we haven't demanded it enough, and I think that enough of this. I think if October 7th taught us anything, and I'll wrap up like this, is that you know I know we have a high threshold for things in Israel, but enough of accepting demonization of Jews, demonization of our country, enough of accepting rockets. We have 20 years of rockets falling in Gaza. Kids in the south, you're running to a shelter, and I'm running to a shelter. Kids in the south of the country, in the border with Gaza, have been running to shelters for 20 years, and we just contained it, accepted it. Same with people in the north of Israel. So I think if one thing we've done through this war, with this war, is that we've all become, and we should continue to be less tolerant of aggression, less tolerance of belligerence. And when we draw the red line, we mean it. Nobody's going to be messing with us after this war, I can tell you that. So God bless you all, and stay safe, everyone.
Stay safe, everyone. Thank you for being here, and please reach out with any questions. Thank you.